story this hour, of course, remains the nexus between Taliban and Pakistan, which stands exposed now. Afghans are rising up against the Taliban regime. In shocking visuals, Talibani fighters opened fire to disperse protesters in Kabul, where a huge crowd, including many women, came out to protest against Pakistan. Slogans of death to Pakistan and freedom were heard. Reports also suggest female protesters have been confined by Taliban fighters. Similar anti-Pakistan protests have also erupted in parts of Iran as well. Resistance leaders like Amrullah Saleh and Ahmad Masood have attacked Pakistan for supporting the Taliban. Anand Narsimhan is joining me on the phone line. Anand, when we look at these protests that are taking place, is it limited to Kabul or is it almost like a civil unrest that is happening in several parts of Afghanistan?
Well, the fact is we're given to understand that these protests are emanating across Afghanistan, across multiple provinces. But although the updates are coming through largely from Kabul, and if Kabul is erupting, then we can say that this is reflecting the sentiment of all of Afghanistan. And it's shocking to see the way these protesters not just have been curbed, but they have been intimidated. There has been abuse, there has been physical intimidation, and there's also been firing in the air to try and disperse these protesters. But if you look at the numbers, more importantly, see the pictures and identify that they're all youngsters, they're all youth, and so many women who have stepped out and who are against. Largely, we are given to understand that this has not been more against the Taliban, but look at the firing that's going on to try and intimidate the protesters away. So this is the only way the Taliban know how to govern. That is, if you don't agree with them or if they don't like you, they'll put a bullet to your head. Now, this is the future that the likes of the US administration and the rest of the world have confined the people of Afghanistan. These pictures are something which perhaps Kamala Harris has to consider. As Vice President of the United States, is this what she's going to stand up for? And is America going to be able to justify this in any way? Because they are the ones, the Trump administration or the Biden administration, who have legitimized the Taliban, who have somewhere allowed Pakistan to act as custodians of what will happen in this nation. A nation of 36 million people has been given into the hands of a military which is at the service of terror outfits like Al-Qaeda, and wanting to even serve shoulder to shoulder with terror outfits like Al-Qaeda and IS Khorasan.
Yes, Anand, a lot of questions certainly being raised on the conduct of Pakistan, the fact that Pakistan members are present also for the entire government formation that is taking place in Afghanistan. There are talks coming in, which is now evident of Pakistan's role in this entire, particularly crushing the resistance in Panjshir. Can Imran Khan really distance himself? Because it's very clear about what Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said. Everything is on record now.
Yes, it is. And the fact is that we are given to understand that nations who've been invited for the swearing in of the interim government, whenever it is, most likely it may be on the 9th of September, and to mark an anniversary of 9/11, 20 years with the formation of a government led by the Taliban. Well, the US has to see how it looks. It reflects very poorly on them, and regionally will their geopolitical clout also come down? Because the nations who have endorsed this are also not very happy with the goings on, especially Iran, which is one of the invitees, and many believe that China, Russia, Turkey and Iran have somewhere allowed all of this to transpire the way it is transpiring, and allowed Pakistan to act as custodians to orchestrate a complete takeover of the Taliban. But for the Taliban force, for the Pakistan Air Force to enter Afghan soil,
yes, fire
at Afghan people, has not gone down well, and Iran has officially called their Panjshir, the dead in Panjshir, as Panjshir martyrs.
Yes,
and that is a big statement coming in from Iran, who are also concerned about the well-being of those in Herat, in the Herat province, the Hazaras, the Shias. So that is going to be a big concern also.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And joining me now is Nick Robertson. He is CNN's international diplomatic editor. He's live with us from Islamabad. Nick, I appreciate your time. Why are we seeing these anti-Pakistan rallies and clearly civil unrest that is happening across Afghanistan?
Afghan society is divided. We know that. It's been at war for many decades. And one of those divisions, just one of the many divisions that exist, is a segment of the population believes that the Taliban has had support over the decades from Pakistan. And they see the Taliban's victory today as a result of that support. That's why they're on the streets today, because the Taliban has to offer. They don't want the restrictions that the Taliban are placing on women. They want women to be in positions of government. They want to be able to continue their jobs wherever they are, working for airlines, or working as doctors, or working as teachers, or whatever it is that they've been doing out in open society, that under the Taliban is going to change. They want this access to good and full and proper education from young children all the way through to university. And from what many people can see in Afghanistan at the moment is that the Taliban are going to change all of that. And as I say, a segment of the population believes the Taliban got to power through the help of Pakistan. And I think that's why you hear people saying that on the streets today. Of course, Pakistan says that is not the case, and there's certainly a lot of evidence to support the fact that while Pakistan may have given help over the decades to the Taliban in certain areas, the Taliban back in the 90s and again now are not in lockstep with Pakistan's government by any stretch of the imagination.
And Nick, we are seeing women as the face of this resistance. The fact that women have come out on the streets and they are, of course, being, the protesters were stopped at multiple places. Would you say that this is happening in Kabul per se, or are these protests across Afghanistan?
We've seen them all the way in the west. In Herat, there were protests reported in Khor province, which is sort of central Afghanistan, remote from many parts. It's a good long drive, if you will, from Herat. It's cut off. We're seeing protests in other places as well, Mazar-e-Sharif. So the evidence is there that in the areas, if you will, not natural habitat of the Taliban, where they have not been the dominant political military influence, that's where women are coming out on the streets, because they've been used to a more open society. And yes, it is women that are at the forefront of the protests. We've seen, the military resistance faded. The last of it really in the Panjshir Valley, still going on to a degree, but the military resistance has faded. Half of the population, of course, in Afghanistan are women.
Yes.
Many of them benefited from the new constitution that came in 2002, 2004, and they're going to lose a lot.
Yes, certainly. Women are at the receiving end, and that is the reason why we are seeing women, as you said, at the forefront of these protests. Nick, what is the present situation in Panjshir?
We understand that the Taliban have the main government headquarters in Panjshir province in the Panjshir Valley, and what we understand from the resistance is, and they were highlighting as recently as last night, ongoing conflicts. They were saying that they were attacking the Taliban in 4 different locations. They say they are in some of the connecting valleys that connect into the Panjshir Valley. They say that they have some of the high ground. We've heard from their leaders, Ahmed Massoud, calling for a national resistance. In some ways, you can see what's happened on the streets, particularly in Kabul today, as a representation of that resistance in a sort of a political form, not a military form. It was noticeable that in those demonstrations in Kabul today, people were carrying the Afghan national flag, not the white banner of the Taliban. So in the Panjshir, the resistance, it does seem continue, but it does seem that the Taliban holds the principal areas within the valley.
All right, Nick Robertson, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us with that on-ground perspective. Nick there was talking about Panjshir, and as Panjshir, the final resistance front, falls to the Taliban, sources tell CNN News 18 that for the top posts of the new regime all those decisions have already been taken and it has been finalized. Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akund is likely to be the head of the state, while Mullah Baradar and Mullah Salam will be his deputies. The Haqqanis will also play a major role in the new government. Their head, Sirajuddin Haqqani, is likely to be the interior minister, and the Haqqanis will nominate all governors. Meanwhile, Zabiullah Mujahid will be the spokesperson to Hassan Akund. However, till now, there is no sign of Taliban's supreme leader, Hibatullah Akhundzada. So where is Akhundzada? Anand, do we know that? Have they really come to that conclusion as to where is he? And also, you know, all of a sudden, we are being told that it is Hassan Akund who will be the head of this government. Who is he? Very little is known about him.
Yes, Hassan Akund was somebody who's nominated by Akhundzada himself as somebody who will be his successor or his heir. But the fact is that he's somebody who's always lived in the shadows. The bigger question is, where is Akhundzada? Akhundzada is somebody which everybody seems that it's just a charade and he's no longer alive. That's what everybody believes, because it is very unlikely that somebody who's the supreme leader, under whose aegis and with whose name and stamp, everything is being done by the Taliban. All their letters are with the salutations or with the address of Akhundzada, but he is not being seen at all. They say he's in Kandahar, but he's not being seen in Kandahar. Very unlike, because the last time around, Mullah Omar was leading from the front. He was there every day, and he was showing his pictures were all over for the world to see. He's the one who walked out holding the shawl of the Prophet in his hand, to try and establish himself as somebody who has the ability and the command and as the supreme leader. But we are not seeing all of that this time. What we are seeing is an overt influence of the Pakistanis, with a lot of clout being given to Haqqanis and the Eastern Taliban. In the entire list itself, the fact that the Quetta Shura and the Southern Taliban group, which is under Mullah Yaqub, see, where is Mullah Yaqub in this list? He's not there. And Abdul Ghani Baradar, who was touted to be the next Prime Minister or President of Afghanistan, is somebody who's now a deputy who's going to share the responsibilities with an Abdul Salam. So clearly, the non-Pakistan aligned group, or a group which would be more pro-Afghanistan and perhaps want to be equidistant with Pakistan, has been sidelined for the moment in this caretaker government. That is very, very evident with the list that we've been able to access, Care Investigations Editor Manoj Gupta.
All right, Anand, thank you so much for joining us. And for days, we have seen the chaotic scenes in Kabul after the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. Now, CNN gets us this exclusive look of life outside Kabul, where clearly the writ of Sharia is being enforced by the Taliban. CNN's Nick Robertson gets us this report from the Paktika province.
Inside the new Afghanistan, in rural Paktika province far from Kabul, the Taliban's provincial governor has called a meeting. No women to be seen. Local village elders and tribal chiefs listen. A young boy takes a selfie. Much has changed since the Taliban were last in charge. Smartphones and social media, but poverty still the country's biggest problem.
We have many expectations, and we are praying the Taliban will deliver.
The week after Kabul fell, a local journalist took a road trip for us to see what was happening outside the capital. Taliban guides showed him the way. At the border, changes already underway. Part charm offensive, giving traders what they want, longer opening hours at the border, and part crackdown, keeping men and women apart.
Let me tell you, before we had one single line for both men and women. Now we have two. They are kept apart.
Pakistani officials easing into the new relationship, backing the segregation. On this journey, two things become clear: Afghanistan's near financial collapse and the hard switch to religious rule. Spotting a crowd, the team stop. It's a provincial courthouse. Inside, local leaders careful to praise the new boss. We used to have to go a long way to get to a Taliban court, he says. Now we have one right here. The new judge in town quite literally laying down the Taliban law, their interpretation of Islamic law.
We asked the previous judges how they used to work. They said they were following the law of the land, not the Sharia. In Islamic Emirate, all court proceedings are according to the Sharia law.
Under Taliban rule in the 1990s, the Taliban's Sharia law led to public amputations for thieves, stoning of adulterers, even hanging. But in the local market, Sharia law is not the big concern. It's making a living.
Business is very bad. We don't know who is in charge. Only low-ranked people are here. We don't know if we can trust them. They are not telling us anything, and the situation has not improved. Prices are going up.
In the barber's shop, business is down. It's not only me, he says, but business is bad in the market. It's not as good as before. They're not alone. The local pharmacist is also struggling. Stocks already depleted under the last government. The clinic's maternity nurse, also worried about finances, says the previous government didn't pay her for the past 4 months and she can't afford to go home. Closer to Kabul, another doctor, more problems. Day and night, he says, we get 25 to 30 patients. And we have just one doctor and one nurse for them all. Outside the hospital, the Taliban claim an alternate reality.
Before you didn't know whether the doctor was coming or not, but now they are there for you all the time.
On this trip, the Taliban's prioritizing of Sharia law and bits of charm offensive seemingly missing Afghans' most important needs, a secure livelihood.
And CNN News 18 has now accessed the charge sheet of the NIA in the SUV explosive case. The charge sheet says Sachin Vaze wanted to regain clout, so he hatched a conspiracy. The NIA, that is the National Investigation Agency, in its charge sheet is saying that Sachin Vaze booked a room for himself under a fictitious name at Oberoi Hotel for 100 nights. Extortion was an intention for hatching this plot, and Mansukh Hiren was murdered due to the fear that he may speak in front of the NIA. So the charge sheet of the NIA is now coming out with the entire, trying to build this entire case, trying to, string together as to what all could have been the reason, motive behind the conduct of Sachin Vaze, who is, remember, at present in the custody of the NIA. Vinaya Deshpande is breaking the story for us and she joins me live. Vinaya, give us the details.
Well, Maria, extremely important document there, the synopsis of the charge sheet filed by NIA in this case, and we are seeing that the main conspirator, Sachin Vaze, who has been named by the NIA, his role has been elaborated further, several scathing charges against him. In fact, the NIA says it has got evidence that Vaze procured the gelatin, planted the threat note, and that has been established in the probe. As you said, the intention behind this conspiracy, the NIA says, was to regain his lost clout, and that is why the other intention was also extortion of money, and that is why the NIA says it was a deliberate attempt to choose a fake car number which was hired by the company and which was deployed for the security of the family member, again in front of whose house this was parked. So clearly several revelations there coming by the NIA. NIA also says that Vaze was the first person to reach on the spot as soon as the security personnel reported the case. Not just that, though the case had already been registered with the Gamdevi police station, he managed to make sure that he got it transferred to CIU, the unit which he headed, and this the NIA says, and I quote, "This was done to vitiate the entire investigation as per his own well-organized conspiracy to meet his aim to put the family as well as general public into fear." So clearly NIA there establishing the role, saying that it has detailed evidence and that Sachin Vaze is the main conspirator who did this with two motives, with the motive of extortion as well as the motive of regaining his lost clout.
Yes, and besides Sachin Vaze, this particular charge sheet, Vinay, as I'm looking at certain details that you have just sent, in the special NIA code, the charge sheet is against 10 accused, including former police officer Sachin Vaze and Pradeep Sharma. What are the charges against him?
Well, the main accused is Sachin Vaze, and he is the key conspirator. Other accused are the ones who have helped Sachin Vaze in this conspiracy. So, for example, we have several other co-accused who have been named for several offences like procuring illegal SIM cards, procuring SIM cards illegally from other states in large numbers in order to make sure that the conspiracy was hatched and was implemented here. We have also seen how the NIA charge sheet mentions in detail about destruction of DVR and how the other co-accused helped in destruction of critical evidence with respect to the whole crime. So the NIA in this document has given a detailed point-wise description of the charges against all the accused, naming Sachin Vaze as the main accused and the main conspirator.
All right, so the accused are charged under various sections, including 120B, which is punishment of criminal conspiracy, 286, negligent conduct with respect to explosive substance, 302 as well, punishment for murder, and kidnapping or abducting in order to murder. So that exclusive charge sheet with Vinaya Deshpande, she was giving us all the details. On that note, we are slipping into a short break. After that, we'll be going straight to Ayodhya for getting us details on what Asaduddin Owaisi is up to.